That sense of purpose, that sense of being back to duty is why I show up every day, whether it's in San Antonio, whether it's online, whether it's here in Austin. That's why I show up with our men and women in uniform in mind and at heart. My name is Josey Garcia. I am a retired Air Force sergeant, and I served 20 years in the dental career field. I began in 1994, where I was on delayed enlistment in high school. I always had a love, if you will, for service. As a youth, I was actually impacted by the foster care system. I had parents who were addicted and had various traumatic issues. My mother was a victim of domestic violence, and you know, we had a pretty difficult life. I was always really drawn to stories of the Vietnam conflict, World War II. I would listen to my grandmother tell me stories of her brother, who was a Marine, who had a tour in Iwo Jima. And hearing how people would fight for their country and sacrifice their lives for something they so strongly believed in, I had a strong sense of wanting to be a part of something. I remember being 16 years old, going to the recruiter's office, and believe it or not, I wanted to be a Marine because one of my friend's older brothers had joined the Marine Corps out of high school. And it was like, I can actually, you know, be who I saw in the encyclopedia. I wanted to help people. And I knew I had to be just as strong as the guys to do that. And so I went to the Marine recruiter's office, went to the door, pulled it with confidence only to find it was locked. And so I went to turn around to leave, and I heard somebody say, hey, you, where are you going? I was like, oh, I wanted to, you know, come in and enlist. Well, you want to enlist? Come over here. You don't want to go over there. And it was the Air Force recruiter. And so I walked in and, you know, fell in love with the story of how I can, you know, be all I could be. I was not only one of the youngest, but I became a leader and really found my knack. I was very outspoken and had a very canny ability to project my voice, but found difficulties because I had a hard time figuring out my left and rights for marching, and was just really excited for service. I ended up stationed at Shaw Air Force Base in South Carolina, and was there for about a year and a half before I signed up for a special duty to join the Army in Panama at Fort Clayton. At that time, it was 1996, and Panama's bases were closing. We had an Air Force base across the bridge at Howard, but I became an Air Force dental technician stationed with the Army, and the culture shock was prevalent. In the Air Force, we take a lot for granted. We take for granted that we have the supplies we need to get the job done, and being dental, my job was typically a 9-to-5 job. Our job was to make sure that our military brothers and sisters were fit to fight at all times, prepared for their deployments, and able to do special duties and do all the cool stuff that me as an Air Force dental assistant didn't really, you know, get to do. One day, as we went into one of the villages to provide medical services, the way that the setup would be, there would be lines, and thousands of villagers would come out and want to find treatment of some sort, but you could only choose one thing to be treated for. Our dental line was short. Not many people want to go to the dentist, and that holds true in other countries as well. And here we were in Africa, and the dental line was always the shortest line. I remember this one gentleman holding his baby. He was waiting in line, and the mood was, you know, a positive mood. People are excited because they're able to get treatment. And he got to the front of the line, And I looked and I asked him, I said, how can we help you? And the interpreter was helping. And he said, my baby needs help. Well, I knew the baby was too young to have teeth, but sometimes cleft palates, and there's other anomalies in birth. And he said, no, my baby's sick. And I looked at him holding this infant who was about the age of my son. And this infant was beyond what I thought we could do to help. And I remember a sense of urgency and running over to the internal medicine people and telling them, we have this infant and this is what's happening. And they said they had to go to the end of their line. What that meant for us was maybe we'll be back the next day, but most likely we wouldn't be able to. And the heart of knowing that that infant was probably not going to survive as a new mother really gave me a different type of appreciation for human life. But I fell in love with this service. And that service has translated over until now, being stationed in Texas at Lackland Air Force Base and retiring. When I retired from the military after my tour in Iraq, I lost my sense of purpose. Not being Sergeant Garcia in uniform anymore was a traumatic culture shock that I don't think any of us are ever prepared for. And that transition was very dark for me. I experienced a loss of sense of self that I was able to find again when we had the humanitarian crisis at our border. I had to do something. I couldn't just sit at home, be comfortable in my house with my family. I had to be a part of what was happening, and within 24 hours of seeing the news, myself and my team were in Ciudad Acuña, Mexico, lending humanitarian aid to people who were just seeking life. It's crazy when, you get embroiled in the politics of it. Politics isn't for us in the military. No matter what branch we're in, we're taught from day one, you eat, breathe, sleep the United States of America. You literally swear to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and you do so with conviction. You do so with your life, because we bleed red, white, and blue. And we bleed that with our lives, and we're willing to give our lives for that. And I never in a million years had any intention of being involved in politics. But I learned through my advocacy that in order to make substantial change for our community, we have to be a part of the process. And because of that, I took the leap of faith and raised my hand to serve as a Texas state representative. That's what I did as the only and the first woman veteran to serve in the Texas State Legislature. I embarked on this journey as somebody who is a mother, a veteran, and a community servant who sees things that are happening not only in Texas and on our own borders, but worldwide. And I can't sit back and just wait for the worst to happen. I want to be a part of bringing people together to make substantial policy changes that are going to impact us all. I'm surrounded by legislators who are doctors, legislators who are attorneys, whose grandfather was the governor, whose great-grandfather was the first, Black representative in the House of Representatives, by so many people who have such great culture, who were original Texans, who were original indigenous people from Texas. I couldn't relate to any of that. And I was afraid that I would be an outcast, somebody who would fight to have my voice heard here and not be heard, but what I found was the exact opposite. That's why I serve as Texas State Representative Josey Garcia, because Josey is the community advocate. Josey is the activist. Josey is the one who testifies unapologetically of all the traumas that she endured and that she experienced, because we have to destigmatize the conversation. It's some of my proudest moments are when my colleagues that are so far on the opposite spectrum of where I lay as a military woman, I am a moderate Democrat proudly, because you can't make change if you don't have all sides at the table. And I know that because as serving in Operation Iraqi Freedom, there were many of times that we were at the table with Iraqi soldiers and Iraqi generals when we're there with the imams of the village. We know that all of our beliefs are fundamentally different. But as we sit there and we sip our chai tea and we share in our tikka chicken and our, our laham, we're having conversations about how we serve. That sense of purpose, that sense of being back to duty is why I show up every day, whether it's in San Antonio, whether it's online, whether it's here in Austin. That's why I show up with our men and women in uniform in mind and at heart, because they're with me. Their stories are with me. And the work's not done. I'm proud to have brought forward legislation this year that had some wonderful bipartisan support. And it's a little radical of a thought. It's introducing and allowing for the use of psilocybin mushrooms for treatment of postpartum depression, of course, as well for our women, but for post-traumatic stress disorder, because as I expressed, a lot of us are given legal psychotropic medications that does not translate into the civilian world. We go to a doctor in the civilian sector and ask for the same prescriptions that we were given in the military, and they treat us like we're drug addicts. They treat us like we want to be high. They treat us like we don't have an issue and we're making it up. And lives are being lost that way. And being able to explain that has gotten us some great bipartisan support for psilocybin expansion and legislation, along with whole plant cannabis, to include Congressman Dan Crenshaw. We have to be able to come together and meet in the middle to make these policy changes. And that's why in 2023, I was super surprised and shocked to be the only woman veteran to serve in this House, because we need more of us. I sit on the Defense and Veteran Affairs Committee, and there's only 3 of us out of 9 that served in the military. Only 3 of us. There's a handful of us out of 145 that have military lived experience, and there needs to be more of us. We need to bring that moderate perspective to where we understand security, where we understand the humanitarian issues. And I implore all young men and women who are in uniform, when you get out and you've lost that sense of purpose, dive headfirst into politics. You don't have to be from a political world. You don't have to know law. You don't have to be a lawyer. You don't have to, have all these accolades. You've served. That lived experience is invaluable in this House, in any of these states. And please get involved. You're worth it. We need you. And so this is a call to duty. This is a call back to action. Put your combat boots on. Raise your hand and renew your faith and your oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States and your state. And be a part of our team. We need you to help make good legislation that's going to impact our children, our great-grandchildren, and the military as a whole.